Okay, we're live. Over to you.
All right. Hello, guys. This is another episode of Cool Story Bro. And today we have me presenting a bit on sort of the general topic cluster around what I've started thinking of as sort of agency and extended agency as sort of a complementary dimension to intelligence. I think we talk a lot about intelligence, not only on this show, but also like in the broader society. Intelligence seems to be something that people are always interested in getting more of and sort of increasing. But I think there's sort of another dimension which is called agency, which is not necessarily the same thing as intelligence, and it's not necessarily completely correlated or causally related to intelligence either. You can be not extremely intelligent in the way that we currently think of intelligence, but you can have extreme agency anyways. So, and sometimes that might be a good aim to aim for rather than increasing your intelligence, because that seems to be actually something that is largely genetically determined, although you definitely have some leeway in sort of increasing that through all kinds of systems that you extend your intelligence through. But agency, I think, is the proper aim for somebody who wants to be an effective agent, if you will, or sort of person in the world, to be able to both increase your internal agency of, for example, being able to control your emotions or your impulses, your drives, or rather bring them into harmonious balance with each other rather than having any one of them take over completely. And then to extend your agency into the world, as in how do you have your purpose, your vision, your drives extend outwards beyond the immediate environment that you're in and into other people's lives, into the broader society, all those kind of things. And so I've started thinking about this in earnest, let's say about 2 years ago, when I first took an online course called Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. You can find that online still. And it's basically, it was sold as a sort of tool or way of thinking, or rather a process of how to manage your personal knowledge. And so it sounds completely unsexy and uninteresting, but the name sort of gives away the sort of not exactly more esoteric, but more powerful sort of pitch, which is building a system of tools, specifically mostly digital or sort of productivity, although I don't like that term, sort of operativity tools that allow you to gather information that you're receiving like on the day-to-day, be that through online media or through radio or TV or wherever else you find information, or maybe even your own mind or other people that you're talking to. However information reaches you or comes into your awareness, to capture that information in some format that allows you to then have it in one central place alongside all the other pieces of information that you've gathered over time. And then for you to be able to work with that information sort of in your own time, in your own way, and create the foundation for then becoming actually a producer of information. And I think this is something that is sorely lacking from the discourse in sort of social media conversations, that people are often perceived as consumers, as receivers of information. And of course, somebody has to produce the information. And if you are solely consuming information, then you're probably much more likely to be sort of on the other side of the API, or on the other side of the script or the narrative that somebody else has created, you act upon. And if you gain the skills, though, to gather information, to form your own opinion, to vet and do your due diligence on information that comes your way, be that through your own analysis or through sort of multi-perspectival assessment from people that you trust, then you can develop a sort of emergent perspective that doesn't follow sort of somebody else's goals that they want you to be an unwitting agent of, an NPC, if you will, and instead become the own storyteller in your own life, and become very good at not only telling your own story to yourself, but also to the external world. And so if you once you shift your perspective from only consuming information and even only gathering, because of course this can also go into sort of hoarding behavior, where you're just collecting information but you never actually do anything with it, which is not very useful either. Then the next step comes thinking of yourself as a producer. And so now I've actually started taking just last week the sort of course that came out of this other course, Building a Second Brain, which is now called Rite of Passage, which should probably best be understood as building a third brain, pretty much. So for me, how I think about it is, it's once you've found a fundamentally sound process that of course stays dynamic, like you're not basically implementing something and then like it stays dead that way, but you constantly add your own components, you change it over time, etc. Once you have a fundamentally sound process of how you receive, vet, and sort of consume information, then you can start to become that producer of information, and you can start to find a much more enjoyable, much more easy, much more collaborative way of producing that information and putting it out into the world and broadcasting it again to other people. Just like we are here right now doing sort of podcasting or conversational storytelling, if you will, and sharing of information, people can write articles, people can create videos, people can create all kinds of artifacts that extend their own storytelling, their own agency into the world, are available 24/7 online for anybody else to find them, just to Google search away, or finding them through their social graph. And that then does your work for you, for finding opportunities for you. Like if you have information out there that you have produced that is of value to other people, and other people find it, they will reach out to you and give you other opportunities relating to that information, or seeing you as somebody who has something to add of value, and then wanting to work with you or wanting to give you more value or more opportunities. And so for me, I've been practicing this sort of process of gathering information now for pretty much 2 years. I think by now I have about 2,500 notes in my collection, which are mostly other people's content that I've saved and that is available to me, but then also quite a bit of information that I've sort of self-created. And they are all in various stages of processing, if you will. The vast majority of the information is unprocessed, just in its original form. And then a small fraction of that is sort of processed, and I've done some highlighting or some bolding or whatever. And then even smaller fraction of that then is summarized, and then an even smaller fraction of that is actually made actionable by me in some format. And so what I thought I would do in today's conversation and podcast is actually use the visual feature of Zoom here that we have. And of course, for the podcast listeners, I recommend you to check out the video episode that we will have up on YouTube, but you should be able to follow along nonetheless. And just share a couple of my notes and sort of make visible and sort of embodied what I just described in principle or in abstract, and make it more concrete. So I'll just go ahead and share my Evernote screen and then go over one or two of these notes, and then we can jump into a conversation of how this applies to everybody else, how to go about creating something like this, and so on. All right, so Evernote is here. Are you able to see this?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we will start with my most used node of all, which is my space-time navigation node. And I already touched on this in a previous call where I showed it to you guys privately, but now for sort of everybody to see. This is basically, because I am traveling so much, my go-to place for knowing like where I will be when, what I need to do for when I need to be when, and basically bringing all the information into one place that relates to me traveling through space and time, hence space-time navigation. And so what you see here is at the very top, we have the title Space-Time Navigation. And I like to use emojis because that means I have a visual way of marking, sort of bookmarking information, or sort of signifying information that allows me to scan content and know sort of spatially where I'm at. Because actually visual understanding is much faster and much more intuitive than sort of abstract reasoning or literacy or reading comprehension. So that's the reason for emojis. It's not because they're cute, but because they work. Then you have underneath here 4 different links so far, and this can of course expand. One is, for example, the flight booking protocol. If I click on that, it takes me to my flight booking protocol, where I've basically specified the steps I need to take in order to book a flight. And then I have here the different search engines that I want to take a look at. Then I will open multiple offers for different flights in different separate tabs, select an offer, input the details, purchase, open my email, forward the email to Evernote, and then I would have it in my Evernote. And so now if I have done that, and this is the next step sort of that I'm going to take soon, is to put basically the boarding pass that has been attached to that email behind, as a link behind these emojis, these sort of flight emojis here that you see, takeoff emojis off the plane, which then allows me basically just pull up my note on my phone, tap on the emoji, which takes me to the boarding pass, and I immediately have all the information there that allows me to get on the plane. And so this is basically a way that you codify a process that is reoccurring in your life in a way that allows you to not have to do everything from the beginning, basically, and have to sort of put in mental energy, but sort of specify, codify, routinize it, if you will, and then to have more of your mind be available and freed up to focus on other things that are more valuable and more deserving of your creative energies. So I'll do a couple more sort of things about this, the design of this note. The same sort of booking protocol I not only have for flights, but I also have it for Airbnbs. And then I also have here links to my different sort of air mile cards, because I travel with lots of different airlines, be it Europe or the States or whatever. Then I have here the category of considering. This is basically all the possible places I might want to head to in order to, I don't know, meet friends or be at conferences or visit people or do work or whatever. And considering means that I am interested in that, but I haven't committed to it. And that's a meaningful difference from coming up, which is the category of the things that I have committed to going to, but I haven't figured out yet maybe all the things about it, like when will that be necessarily, or whether I already have flights or I already have accommodation, or who I will be there to meet, all those kind of things. And so I've also started actually in the considering category still putting in information from other people and their flight schedules or travel schedules to be able to coordinate with them because I might want to meet them. And the beautiful thing about Evernote is because it's just a note and you have many different formatting options, be that a table, be that a list, be that code, be that whatever, you can change the outlay or sort of the interface of the information on the fly towards something that more properly allows you to work with it. And so I might actually change this at some point into a table rather than just a list. So in the coming up category here, I feel like all these different places I've already committed to going. And I'm now like seeing, oh, already, okay, the next 2 stops, I'm already good. Like I already have my flight tickets, I already have my accommodation, I don't need to worry about that. Oh, this one I might need to worry about. And I need to now take action. Like I don't talk with the people that want me there to actually now finally have the flight booked, all that kind of stuff. And now recently I started to extend this note into a second note, which I have linked up here, which I get to by, like, basically it says here, are you making changes? Like the question is, when I'm making changes, update this node because this node is dependent on this node. And so I click on this link here and I've called it Existential Ventures on the Road. Existential Ventures is the name of my company. And I've also marked here external version, like to remind me this is something that's externally visible. And then I have designed this note in a bit different way. It's more of a social note where I actually speak to people who will be consuming this information. So people might be wanting to meet me and I'll tell them, okay, do you want me at your conference event or meetup? Do you want me like, do you want to hire me? Do you want to just grab a coffee or whatever? Email me here. And then I have a public version of the schedule that is coming up, where I have actually redacted here some parts of the information that I don't want necessarily everybody out there to know or to have available. And so that allows people who I am collaborating with or who might be interested in working with me or for some other reason want to meet up with me to themselves in their own time, figure out where an alignment of space and time, if you will, and maybe even intentionality comes about, rather than talk with me back and forth and for like lots of time that is actually quite laborious and sort of time consuming. And then reach out to me already knowing all the context that they need in order to make a meeting happen, rather than us having to establish that context in conversational form. And so this node actually is also on my website. Let me just share the website. Where's Safari? There. So on Safari, we have a website. This is the website that I created last year and that I've now started building out more and more and integrating with my sort of second and third brain. And you see up here two tabs, so to speak. You have here and you have now. And so here is a page where I have linked to the node that I just showed you, the externally visible node of Existential Ventures on the Road. And so I can just shoot somebody this link and have them check out where I will be when, and then have the conversation based on that. And so here is the link to the node. I click on that, and then it takes me to Evernote, the web version with that node. And so that way, it all works beautifully together, sort of. And you see here working together my second brain, which is the Evernote, sort of my personal, private way of working with information, integrated with a public way of working with information with the third brain, basically the social brain, if you will. And so I sometimes think about this in terms of digital surface area. If you want to be somebody who sort of has opportunities come to them and has interesting people that they're working with and nice and cool conversations, all this kind of stuff, you need to be able to increase your surface area of information, if you will, on the internet, that allows people to rub up against you, basically, to like actually stumble upon you, to find a way towards you, so that they are sort of just like how would you say that? There's some kind of stickiness to you in the digital realm, rather than sort of just ephemeral information that just goes away again. But let's go back to the Evernote. So that's a pretty cool use of that, basically combining second and third brain. And then in the note, also one other use of this is for me to actually know where I was over the past year in detail. And I can always give somebody an answer. And it's actually quite nice to have a memory sort of prompt. Oh, I did this cool thing with these cool people, and like, oh, I have such a great life. Like if I ever feel down on like, oh, I'm dealing with some challenges or some problems or whatever, look at this crazy shit that I've already done, that I can see here quite clearly where I was and what I did. So, and if you see here, 2019 already has been pretty travel intensive, and 2018 even more, then I can't really feel too bad about where my life has been and is going. So yeah, that's basically one node that I've been using. It's the node I've been using the most. And there are other ones as well. And so I showed the last time actually also the productivity playground node. And this is one that I've only recently started sort of playing with more and systematizing. And this is basically a way to take all the sort of the most interesting information that I come across, be that in an article or an idea or somebody else saying something about something, and putting it into one central place where I can take an awareness through a process of refinement and practicing and experimentation down to sort of through a pipeline down to the integration into my being, if you will, like where it actually becomes part of me. And I'm not actually anymore putting in excess energy to sort have it walk through this process. And so you see here a table, and in the table there are 6 different sort of status categories: awareness identified, awareness refined, proposal seasoning, change experimenting, change practicing, and protocol integrated. And so as I take something, I look at it and I change the information and I play with it and I make it more routine, like all those kind of things, it moves down from the top towards the bottom. And so you see here different pieces of information in different stages. For example, micro outlining technique, which I find very interesting, is still at the very beginning. It's just an awareness that I found interesting and I might want to investigate. What to do when bored is already 2 steps down. It's basically like, this came from an idea that a friend of mine had, Alex, who basically has routinized or sort of given himself a specific set of activities that he will do when he is bored, so as not to have it be something where it's just like aimlessly wandering, but just, or rather aimlessly wandering might be one of the activities he specifies in that list, but that he doesn't like use time that is not used up by work or by food or whatever in a way that either relaxes or replenishes him or actually allows him to, over time, make progress on some other thing. Like, for example, play a chess game, or listen to some music, or draw some mind maps on your blackboard, whatever, like sort of things that are maybe meditative, that are maybe not productive in the most strict sense, but that actually allow you to make progress on something over time without having to spend thought on it necessarily. And so I might be integrating this into my stuff even more. And so the note that I just showed you on space-time navigation is down here, and it's it's already in the practicing the integrated category, if you will. And there are a couple others that are sort of lagging behind a bit. One is purchase processing plan, basically the central place where I put all the kinds of stuff that I might want to purchase, and then I move it down through a process of vetting whether I actually need it, whether I can afford it, all that kind of stuff. Call and meeting log, basically a central reference for all the calls that I've had with notes, so that I know what I talked about and can back up my statements perhaps in the future if somebody disagrees with something. Then there is a weekly review, which I actually haven't integrated very much, which is sort of the GTD thing, where you check all your pieces of information and make sure that you're sort of making progress on them. Content processing stack is basically, I also haven't integrated very much, but it's basically a sort of the central place where I could put in links that people sent me or information I come across or all those kind of things, and then process it and like decide what to watch or listen to or read next. But I seem to be already doing that pretty well without this note, so I might actually scrap this note in the future. Yeah, and so I think we can stop here for a second. Like, this is quite a bit of information, and I've been monologuing for already 20 minutes. So I'll let you guys jump in and we can have a conversation about this, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm curious actually, because like you said, that node you might stop using. Like, how do you decide what's worth the effort and time to like organize this part of your life, and how do you measure what you're getting out of that versus the time it actually takes to track it and then integrate it? Because for me, like, I'm just not super disciplined on a lot of this stuff, and if a tool isn't super easy to use, I'll just stop using it, and then it's not live anymore, and then it's not useful. So how do you stop this stuff sort of stagnating, and how do you sort of measure whether your life is changing in ways like you might travel less next year, for example? That might change, right?
That should be your guide, exactly that. Like, whether it makes sense for you, like whether you find it joyful to use, and whether it actually solves a real problem. Because people have these weird ideas about having to be productivity masters, which I think is a horrible idea anyways, of basically how do I commoditize my moments of time as much as possible so that I get the most economic value out of them, which is sort of an over optimization of one single metric, which I don't think is a good idea. But for me, all of the nodes that I do use most I use most because they actually make my life easier, and because they allow me to spend more time in the stuff that I really want to do, which is like all the creative stuff, all the conversations, all the joyful stuff that I am interested in. And by having these systems sort of in the back, and by having them emerge out of a genuine need and out of a genuine interest in making that easier for me, I keep them up to date. And if something doesn't work anymore, I just reject it. And this is another point that I think everybody should take away from this, is that this is not something that you do because somebody else told you this is valuable and you need to like up your game, man, and all those kind of things, but rather you recognize that maybe in some part of your life, you are failing to meet your own needs or to solve your own problems or to make progress on your own goals. And you feel the need to add some structure to it that allows you to take all the stuff that's up here, which you're spending so much brain energy on, and put it out into some place that keeps it available to you, keeps it useful to you, but doesn't take energy up here. And so basically what I just showed you is just the sort of inactionable information part, or rather the part of my system that deals with information processing and with sort of just keeping information available. The other part of this system, which I haven't showed you yet, which I probably should now, is the actionable part, like basically GTD, or getting things done, taken from the analog age where it was created to the digital age where it actually properly belongs today, at least. And so let me just share my screen for another thing. It's called GTD, getting things done. My things, which is like a Mac only, Apple only, GTD specific productivity tool, if you will. And you can use all kinds of other tools. It doesn't really matter what the tool is. I just like this one very much. And here you see the today view, but we should probably start with the inbox view. So this is my inbox, my task inbox. And you see here 85 pieces of tasks, 85 tasks, or sort of just pieces of things where I said, okay, I want to do something about this. And this is basically my backlog, all the stuff that I have over the past couple of days put in here, but haven't had the time yet to process, like to figure out what project it belongs to, or when I might be able to do it, or when the deadline is, or all those kind of things. And so this is basically, I put anything in here immediately when I think of something that I might want to do, be that in the conversation, be that while I'm working on something, be that when I'm like playing around, whatever it may be, because it immediately takes it out of my mind and keeps my mind free to do what I need to do in the present and be aware of the context I'm in the present, rather than keeping like worrying about all the shit that's floating around up here. And so because I have it then here, I know it is here. And if I need to check whether there's something I need to do, I just need to go there. And so I don't need to worry about all that stuff. And that's really, I think, the most important thing. This is a way that you can stop worrying about whether you are falling, like sort of whether things are falling below between the cracks, or whether you are falling behind on something, or whether you're not meeting goals or whatever. And so what I then do is I will go through these tasks and I will, for example, add them to a project or sort of some area of responsibility in my life. And of course, if you want to check out GTD, like do that in your own time. There's sort of a whole philosophy behind it. It's basically process thinking applied to productivity, or how I like to think of it, operativity. And then I will, for example, this task, the Llama task, which basically an interview app, I will put to, is it still here? Yes, to career dev, which is basically just a category where I put things that, allow me to develop my career forward. And then now that it is part of a sort of area of responsibility, I will also add a time that I want this to appear in my things inbox. And I will, for example, put this on to tomorrow, Wednesday. If I then think, okay, I need to have this happen by some date, then I can also actually add a deadline. Okay, this needs to happen by Friday. So I have both a time that will my app will remind me to do it, as well as a deadline that I know I need to be doing this by. And then I can also still add tags. I, for example, segment some of these tasks into like contexts where I might be able to do them, be that phone or home or desktop or whatever, or work. The time that it might need to take, sort of 3 different simple segmentations of like, okay, this will be a short task, this might be a medium task, this might be a long task. And then energy that it will take. Like, is this an easy thing? Is it an average thing? Is it a challenge thing? And I don't do this consistently because it doesn't actually add much value to me currently, but sometimes it is valuable if you are sort of strapped for time on a specific context, or you don't really feel the energy to do something challenging, then you can, in this today view, which is sort of my daily task view, I can now segment these tasks by context or by time or by energy level. And so, for example, in context here, I can say, okay, I'm right now at home and I want to check whether I can do this at home. And so, oh, these things I can do at home. Or I want only to do the things that are now, I have a good hour available and I want to be doing the things that are taking an hour or whatever. Or I feel like I want to do something that's easy rather than challenging, whatever it may be. And again, these systems are only dependent on them working for you, not on you feeling like you need to do this because somebody else found it valuable to them. And that's another point, again, about the agency part, if you will, of getting in touch with what increases your agency and not paying too much attention what makes other people's agency like increase, like, or rather taking inspiration from them, but not taking it as gospel, as something that you need to do because it worked for somebody else. We are so different in many different respects that yes, we can learn from each other, but a lot of the time you already have all the information you need up here. You just need to find a way to work on the information and transform it and find a relationship with the inner part of you that is that creative wellspring, in a sense, from which agency and intelligence and creativity, all those things spring forth. Can't hear you, Michael.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was saying it's kind of like an SOP for your life, and it's interesting that I'm probably not as like busy as obsessed as you this year, like in terms of travel or in terms of just things going on. So I don't have that much information to process where right. Things might slip, like booking a flight and stuff. If I didn't have it all written down somewhere, probably I'd have a VA and an SOP. Those parts of it, if I had a lot of that regularly ongoing. But I'm trying to think in terms of like what you were saying about turning into from a consumer of information into a producer of information, because I talk about that a lot, and how most people just have too much coming in and they don't have enough sort of space to synthesize and process that and turn it around and actually come up with something independent or original and then put it out there. Right. So like what I do with a lot of research I do like around health and crypto is I'm constantly just reading all the time, and then I'll just bookmark a bunch of stuff in my browser, and then I'll one tab it when I get to 150 tabs open or something, and then I haven't lost it. So that doesn't really work maybe as well as your system. It's kind of funny, like I know it's there if I ever need to go back to it, but I very rarely ever go back to one tab. It just makes me feel more comfortable to close my tabs. And so it's just a really weird, whatever glitch that you have to do to keep your brain happy that you can close these tabs and won't lose the information. So it seems to work just from that perspective. If I ever do need it, it's there, right? So one tab is a really good hack for browsing. And I get most of my research done on the computer, not too much on the phone, though I don't really have a good system for when I'm on the phone. And that's why I end up having way too many tabs open on my phone browser. But from turning into like a consumer of information into a producer, like stuff will just come up randomly sometimes, even years later, things I posted on Facebook. And because I'm using Facebook also to like synthesize and capture ideas, and so when I feel like I have enough to at least share some sort of original insight or just share something interesting, I'll put it on Facebook. And then Facebook's always reminding me of these things, and I'm seeing these things, where my thoughts were maybe a year or 2 or 3 years ago and how that's changed.
You're a natural in terms of operating a third brain, basically. Like you are already far beyond the sort of second brain stage. Like you're already so good at taking information and sending it out as signal again to your social sphere, and then engaging in this process of vetting it or changing it or transforming it or getting new perspectives. And you're already at the producer of information part. So if whatever you're doing already works for you, there's no real need to add something on top of it. And so just to be clear also, for me, why I was so interested in integrating this into my life was, and why I sort of do this very systematic and sort of very, or what appears very systematic or appears very laborious or time consuming, which it actually isn't. I actually don't spend much time in my Evernote at all. It's more just like whenever I need it. And I actually don't do much categorization at all, because the point of this is not to categorize sort of, which would be basically a premature optimization habit, which is stupid. You never want to categorize something before you need it, because actually you already, like search is so good today in all tools, be that in Google, be that in Evernote, wherever. If you need to find something, you don't need to look into categories, you just need to search something and remember something about it. And Evernote even has optical character recognition. So I will put like some photographs or some sort of screenshots in there that Evernote can actually search as well the text of. So all those things are really, really nice. But again, for me, using this or integrating this or building it out this much, it has come out of my primordial drive for information consumption that in the past has crippled me. And we've talked about this before, that I was sort of at the point where I was just consuming information, like for 9 months straight, like this one podcast, 1,300 episodes, but never actually doing much with that information. And so I realized at some point that I needed to find a way to tie my information consumption to real world progress, where I am responsible for making progress, where somebody else might be relying on me, so as to rein it in and make it useful rather than sort of an addictive habit that I'm just engaging in because it stimulates me and gives me novelty. And so this is actually part of the this. I'll share another note that I just recently updated thanks to the course that I'm in right now. Let's do this here. This is my 12 favorite problems note. And it's an exercise that we just did in the course again, and that I first did 2 years ago. And back then I only ended up doing 3 problems, basically the 3 above here, although they were phrased a bit differently. And now I've made it into 12 ones. And this is basically an exercise that you do to sort of specify what are some statements about life that you will want to sort of prime your mind with, so that you recognize information as fitting into these sort of 12 problems or sort of areas of life that you are interested in. And so what that does is then it allows you to spot opportunities, notice threats, and have things play around in your mind that you're interested in, but you don't need to spend much thought sort of researching it explicitly. And so sometimes I will find some information and then like, oh, this actually is part of like this problem here. Like here's the actual, the problem like that I just described. How might I harness my primordial drive for information consumption for productive ends? Which was a problem that I had back in like 2017, much more than I do today, because today I am already so involved in so many real world contexts, like in this podcast, in communities, in ventures, in my own business, in speaking, all these different areas of my life, that I have now no longer a problem of harnessing my information consumption for productive ends. I now actually have a problem of how do I keep other people from like needing something from me because I am already over capacity in a sense. Or how do I actually, for example, this is another problem that I have here, the fourth one, how might I fluidly operate my 3 brains such that I steadily experience growth of peak and baseline performance? Basically another way that I can sort of solve this problem by finding a way to increase my capacity rather than sort of send other people away or something like that. So yeah, this is another like great way of sort of thinking about your life and like getting perhaps a clarity also on your priorities or on your priority. Because lots of people, we talked about this last time, lots of people don't have a clear idea of what matters to them. And as a result, they are disintegrated in their daily life and are just being drawn by the thing that is most stimulating or most enraging or most distracting to all kinds of other people's narratives, other people's goals, other people's stories, and not really the creators of their own story.
Yeah, I like the idea of like being clear about what is the open issues in your brain, or like what are the unsolved problems, because I think you're right. Otherwise, you just kind of get sucked into all these other narratives, and that's probably happening to everyone on some level, right? You've got to try and block out all these stories that you're not really interested in, and people keep shoving them down your throat in one form or another. If you use social media platforms like Facebook or whatever, you're going to constantly be bombarded by this stuff. So if you know there's an area of open issues that you're trying to solve, like how to be happier and specific, instances like when you're traveling a lot and you want to come up with ways of like keeping your health, in check and having good routine. That was a real struggle for me when I was traveling a lot. To be more
it's another one on my list.
Yeah. And just being kind of clear about what the issues are, like letting your subconscious kind of work on it, and the answers often come to you when you're just like napping or whatever,
Yes.
So, but having it there for the brain to kind of kick around and having it at least written down somewhere. I mean, that's a very simple form of what you're talking about. And just those things can be super powerful before you get into the more advanced noding and stuff, like just being clear on some of these issues that, you know, you can let your brain start to work on those instead of getting sucked into other, you know,
But the crucial part there is that you actually externalize it. That it's not just something that you clear up here, but you actually put it out into a physical form of some sort, be that a digital or actually I prefer most of the time pen and paper, because it is much more haptic. It's much more sort of, you're actually placing the pen on the paper rather than like doing your muscle memory with keystrokes, which is a very different way of thinking or writing. But yeah, you also spoke about something really important right now, touched on something, which is open loops. I mean, I already mentioned this, like with your brain energy being sucked into all these things that are sort of in your mind, you can think of these as open loops, things that are in your mind that are sucking energy, that are just cycling through your CPU, if you will, or working memory and sucking energy because you haven't found a way to put them somewhere else that you can return to, or to actually solve them so that the open loop is closed and it no longer takes that energy. So that's a really crucial one.
I've got a funny question for you. I'll give it over to Lynn. Have you discovered an open loop as a single man for like women? Because they probably take up most of the space in your brain as an average man in terms of open loops.
Well, you're asking basically about how I approach like the woman question.
Yeah, like as a single guy, you know, probably the most, I wouldn't say distracting, but it's part of our, you know, we're built into our DNA is to find a partner. And so I would say as an open loop, we're always trying to evaluate what is going to make us a better mate, or how to find women, where we're going to meet these women, what we're going to say to them. Like all these things are just like crazy open loops that are constantly running around in your jungle brain. And obviously society has its idea of what you should be doing. But how do you approach that? I'm just curious if you have any suggestions in that scenario for guys specifically.
First of all, check out here. This is an actual area in my life, which I call partnering.
I knew it.
Which doesn't have actually any items in it, I don't think. Yeah, there's actually nothing in here, as you see, because it's not really something that I really productize or like areanize very much. Like I don't really put tasks in there, but it's more of a natural thing already for me. And I might maybe put something in there, like, I know, reading up on red pill stuff or like some specific issue or something like that, you know, but mostly, I think it really depends on your life, like, and what you want out of your life. So for me, I've gotten clarity on what I want out of my life in terms of sort of sexual relationships or romantic relationships or even family at some point, about now more than 2 years ago, where I found out or realized that I want to have a family one day and that I feel already ready now. Like, to be honest, if I had a partner that I was completely in love with, that I think could grow with me as much as I think I will grow, and who is also interested in having children, then I would be starting now. But that's not the case. And so for me, it's more, it's basically getting myself into a position where that can come about. And so that includes all kinds of things, like making myself the most attractive man I can be, putting myself into positions where I'm forced to sort of overcome perhaps residual shyness, or I don't know, making my career work as great as I can, so that I enter into social contexts where there are high quality women that I might want to approach. All of these things sort of add to that, but it's because I have clarity about what I want that I can systematically go about getting into the position that will come about. And of course, my mom always rolls her eyes and sort of says, "Oh, you're like approaching this like an engineer, like you shouldn't be like doing like it'll just happen." Like, no, mom, like it'll happen because I made all the conditions work. And then of course I can't predict what will happen and who it will be and when it will come about, but I will be in a position to take advantage of the opportunity when the opportunity presents itself. So, and that's another way that I think that people can profitably, in a sense, think about achieving goals. It's not that you posit a goal and then you always measure yourself, oh, am I at the goal? Am I at the goal? Am I at the goal? Or when will the goal come? But more, where do I want to be? What state of affairs in the world do I want to be true at some point in my life? And then what are the things that I can do that make my likelihood of achieving that state of affairs in the world more likely? Well, like increase that basically.
Yeah. It was kind of a half joke, but I'm serious in the way that probably guys who think about women a lot, right? So in terms of energy and open loops, that's probably a huge one that we're trying to figure out, who's going to make the best mate and how do I, evaluate and increase my chances of success. Like that's just part of our genes.
I'm moving to Ukraine. That's another part of that.
Yeah, you mentioned that one. That's a good one. But no, I think your point about having some idea of someone who's going to grow with you, that's probably been my biggest aha is like, yeah, you have all those short-term, things you could be attracted to someone about, and the time and the space, and you can divert a lot of energy into it. But if ultimately they're not going to grow with you, like that's a huge one, because the world is changing so much, and I feel like I'm also changing a lot, like day to day, week to week. So someone could be a great match for you today, and then a year from now you're like, oh, actually I'm a completely different person. So that's an interesting one. But I'm kind of sidetracking there. But I thought
it's fine. Like I made a decision about at the end of my school life, where I saw lots of my friends have their first relationships or several relationships, and I was completely turned off by their codependency or by their sort of partnering with people that were not really right for them. And I made sort of a decision to myself, sort of a vow to myself, that I would, instead of focusing on attracting or getting into a relationship as quickly as possible, I would focus on making myself the most attractive and sort of man I can be, and getting my own shit sorted out so that I am a good person to be with. Because this is something that people often forget. Like, they're looking for the perfect partner, but they're forgetting that they need to be the perfect partner as well if they want to to get the perfect partner. So, and of course, such a thing as the perfect partner doesn't exist, and there's no such thing as the soulmate either. But you need to find a way to always, I think, reframe all the problems in your life as challenges to figure out and as things to increase your agency in, rather than like as something that you can take action on, rather than as something that happens to you. Because if you do that, if you say it's something that happens to me, then you elsewhere, and you feel like victim, and you feel like you can't actually do anything, and that produces depression, it produces anxiety, it produces inaction, and it produces misery and suffering. And so this is also the reason why I actually, if you look at the note that I showed you, the 12 problems note, all of these questions, every single one of them, I framed or phrased as, how might I? And so it's open-ended, and it is like open to like all kinds of different things. It might be like researching about something, it might be taking action, it might be being creative, whatever it may be. Like, but it's always, it frames this question in a way that I am the responsible party in moving this problem forward, or like moving this progress forward in solving, or not even, the point of these is also not to solve these problems, because these are open-ended things. You can't actually solve them, but to give you sort of 12 open loops, if you will, that will stimulate you into different directions and allow you to make massive progress on them.
Nice. I think Lynn wanted to say something as well, so I hand over to him.
Yeah, it's interesting. More, it's the show to dive a bit deeper into this, because I was having a chat with a friend the other day, and I found out ever since his Windows 95 PC, he's never gotten rid of any data. So he's got about 3.5 petabytes at the moment. And when he told me that, it made me think of you when you're talking about a second brain, because he's a developer. So a lot of that will be, say, projects and so on, it take up a lot of space. But it's all encrypted and stored in the cloud. I was like, oh, wow. But one thing I wanted to ask is that, not that you maybe kept track or you made notes, but have you noticed since making this change onto fully going into having a second brain, like, has it been more than, like, is it very, very noticeable the positive impact it's had in your life? Or is it something you think you need to wait a bit longer to see? Because I know it's been not close to maybe 2 years. And I guess the point you're at right now, and the way you utilize it, is probably not the way you utilized it 18 months ago. So I'm sure it's probably creeps up. So at what point did you kind of find that, okay, this is definitely working out for the positive?
Right. Well, I think I got some benefits immediately after I did that course for the first time. And then it sort of went through a trough, and then I had this thing there, maybe I should check it out again. And this is usually how it goes, like you find some new thing, and then it's interesting, but then like your life changes, and like it doesn't really provide much use. And so it's only been really in the last year, I would say, where I found myself in positions where I was forced to sort of up my game in certain respects, and then found the need to re-implement or restart my usage of these systems. And now, especially starting about 2 months ago now, it really sort of kicked into super high gear, where this is now the way I run my life, and where the way that I am able to stay part of so many different projects and companies and sort of events and whatever and have so many different conversations. Like you guys are like one of the like 17 different projects or sort of social contexts that I regularly interact with, and that adds something to my life that I wouldn't be able to do as well as I am right now without these systems, because it would demand more from me than I'm able to do just with this app here. So yeah.
All right, cool.
Ollie.
I actually did Getting Things Done for about a year in 2011, and I got too tired of it because it was too much paperwork. And then I started to try to use things like Evernote and stuff, and I couldn't find a really good system. But it seems to me, in the context of agency, that the reason that it works is because it kind of frees you from the emotional labor of decision making, and you begin to realize that choosing to make individual decisions about yourself, you unconsciously include your own identity in decision making in general. And then once you have like a second brain or an external system for you to store these ideas, you realize that it's just a facade, isn't it? And then, so I was wondering what you thought about that in terms of being a bit too abstract, but in terms of agency and emotional labor and like identity. Because when you think about things, you think, oh well, what does this mean to me? And like, what about my national identity, and what about this and what about that? And I do think once you kind of get to step away from that, helps a lot. And then you can just be a computer, and then you realize you do have lots of emotional stuff, but it's more sovereign. So
right.
I was wondering if you could touch on your process through that, if you relate to it.
For sure. I mean, again, like what I just showed you is like a little window into a specific part of my life, right? But it's only relevant in the context of all the other parts of my life. And so I didn't talk to you about like the experience that I had in terms of personal growth, or the women I have met, or the friends that I have, or the mentors that I've interacted with. Like all these things matter here as well, and they probably have shaped me into a person where this way of operating my life is useful for me. But in terms of emotional labor, in a sense, like I want to come back to this every time. It's like, it's not that you're supposed to substitute emotional way of thinking, or like being an emotional person or having emotions with this process, but you free yourself up to feel the emotions that you have as fully and as appropriately as possible by having all the other sort of logistical, administrational, all the stuff that you need to do in order to run your life somewhat well, not be something that adds additional worry to your life. Because you can trust that there is a way that you're working on those things while all the other shit is happening in your life. You don't feel as overburdened, as overwhelmed, I would say, or at least I don't, as I would otherwise be if, for example, I don't know, my visa runs out for something, and then my dad dies, and then like this project goes awry, and like all these different things are suddenly collapsing together, and then I feel unable to deal with that. Because I have a way to do the project management and the task management and sort of the proper slotting of creative activity throughout my day and throughout my week and throughout my months, I know that I will get to what I need to get to at the appropriate time. And this is another part of this, which I haven't touched on, which is sort of just-in-time project management. So lots of people, when they start a project, they specify, okay, this needs to be done by then, and I will start with this, then this will happen, then this will happen, then this will happen, then this will happen. And it's this waterfall planning of, I'm starting from here, and all these things need to happen so that I get there. And this is sort of very much old management philosophy, when information was scarce, when collaboration was hard, and when you wanted to not share information with anybody, and where the context was easy enough to understand that you could actually predict lots of the factors involved in your success. Today, these conditions are no longer true. Like, information is abundant, collaboration is easy if you know how to do it, and you actually want to be sharing as much information as possible so as to increase your own surface area with other collaborators so that collaboration is more easy. And you actually can't predict a lot of the things that are going to be impacting your business or your life or your success or whatever. And so you can't actually do much prediction. What you can do instead is you can do navigation, or sort of gyroscopic navigation, where you are in every single moment, you're adjusting a little bit. but you're not planning, okay, this will happen by then, this will happen by then, this will happen by then. And so, especially on the individual scale, shifting your way of working from one, okay, this needs to happen by then, by then, by then, by then, and then executing them like a robot. Instead, you know what needs to happen, or sort of where you want to be, and then you look for opportunities to achieve progress towards that goal. And then, of course, it might be that you actually specify certain steps that need to happen. Like, I'm not saying planning isn't useful at all. Like, that's not true. Planning is useful, extremely useful. But just as, I think, I don't know who said that quote, but like the value of planning itself, so that you get some clarity about what is involved in achieving something, and you adjust that plan over time. Like I think it was no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, basically, right? And so that way of thinking applies to your life as well. Like, I might have some idea right now of where I might want to be, or who I might want to be with, or whatever, but reality always takes precedence. And so I let reality inform my action in the moment more than my sort of reification of what I think reality should be. And the correlation, so the shift of that in project management is basically just-in-time project management. So because I'm sort of what you could call a full stack freelancer, basically somebody who runs their own informational infrastructure and interfaces with many different contexts and has different sort of tools that are doing the job. And because I have these two systems put into place, the sort of second and third brain, I basically, whenever I commit to a project, I don't do much until the deadline rolls around. Because basically the closer to delivery that you create something, the more information it can include in its design. Because if you started like 2 months before something is due, and like you already define what it will be exactly, then you will not be able to take into account the information that might be happening like the week before delivery, which actually is relevant to like making this thing successful. At least that's useful for me, because lots of the work that I do is in high pace, high velocity, high change contexts. And so it doesn't make much sense to pre-optimize, but to actually do something when it is due. And so just-in-time project management is basically, for me, because I have these systems in place, because I have always information from which to start, I never start from a blank page, basically. For me, creating something new is less me sequestering myself into like a monastery and writing like for 12 days straight, like in sort of solitude and silence, but it's a much more collaborative, much more social, much more creative process where I will take existing information pieces that I have and I will combine them sort of as blocks with each other, and then just run sort of my own personal algorithm on it, like just sort of my creative process that then puts it into a way that people can understand it, or so that the information becomes intelligible to the audience that I'm trying to reach. And so just-in-time project management is basically you only do things just when they're due, like in the time frame that you need to be successful in delivering them as close to the delivery date as possible. And so having these systems has basically freed up me and my emotional life sort of so extremely, because I know, like literally right now, I have next week on Monday, I'm going to be in Italy with 2 of my collaborators and a bunch of other collaborators that are going to be flying in for different parts of that sort of 10 or 8-day retreat program that we've organized for Erasmus students. And I am supposed to be holding 4 different workshops, and I have prepared none of them, but I have complete confidence that I will be able to create value for these people because I have all the information there. I am a good enough speaker that I can always transport information in a good way, and I am a good enough social person that I can engage in interactive processes with them, that for me, I don't even feel worried at all that I don't have like 4 workshops worked out in detail. Whereas my 2 collaborators who don't have this in place, they're like obsessing over their workshops for the past month and like spending lots of time on it. And I'm like, no, dude, like I don't need that. I can just do it when I need to. And because actually we've been involving more and more people in this project so spontaneously that want to come and just see us or want to be part of it, who themselves then came up with the idea of doing themselves workshops in the thing, now we might even not have to do any workshops other than like 1 or 2 ourselves and just have other people do the workshops. And so why would I spend like hours and hours on building my workshop if in the end somebody else is doing most of the workshops and I'm just there to basically to sort of steward the thing. So this type of sort of working where lots of the stuff is emerging, and if you pre-optimize, you actually kill an entire field of play, if you will, before it even can come about, by having too clear an idea of what you think you need to do in order to get to where you want to go.
Right. Cool. So so the idea of agency is kind of actually more about the interaction between you and the world, as opposed to
very much so.
That you can adapt as it goes, and you have a system that you can
yeah.
change.
Yeah, and it's like it's us basically, like, again, like, so agency has multiple seats in a sense. Like, yes, agency starts in the individual, but I as an individual, I'm just a macro unit in a sense of smaller units of agency. Like, I'm made up of cells or of organs and of skin and all these different tissues, whatever, and they are just units of cell agency in a sense that has come together to extend the agency of the cells. What are cells? Cells are agglomerations of like molecules, all these different things. So you have the scale of life and agency down and up. And so I'm just one other unit of agency in life. And you guys are the same thing. And we as a group are another unit of agency, because what we're doing is we're like, I'm sending you information, you're sending me information, we're helping each other like figure out certain things. And so what we're doing is, what we're creating here is a social organism. We're creating basically a human organism, like of multiple individuals, a multi-individual, if you will, that has an agency of its own and that extends our individual agencies out into time and space. And so that's the way that I think about it. And it's a real joy, actually, not to put the focus of agency onto yourself exclusively sometimes. Like, I don't really think of myself as like this stoic man reaching forth into the world, venturing and conquering the world, but it's more like, yes, I have sort of that drive forward, but I much more enjoy actually the interplay, the connective, creative social play with other people, where we're adding something to each other and we're making progress together on our mutual or sort of shared or even complementary goals.
It's quite interesting because it sounds like you're kind of, people talk about automation and then finding your own, the 1% thing that you're better at than anyone else in the world, and that people become more creative when they're able to focus on creativity and stuff like that. Do you outsource everything else apart from that?
It's bullshit. Like, the AI idea is bullshit. Like, I hate how stupidly the Silicon Valley and sort of engineering mindset has perverted that idea of AI, which they sort of posited as a secular god, right? Like this thing that will consume us and kill us, and like it's this thing that has its own agency. Bull crap. Like, AI doesn't have its own agency. AI is an extension of our agency. And it's mostly right now an extension of the agency of the people who create it, or the people who give the money to the people who create it and who then control it. So a much better idea, or much better way of thinking about intelligence, is extension of intelligence or extension of agency. So AI is just algorithms. It's just data algorithms. And it's a way that people who can specify specific rules about the environment and about sort of logic, etc., the ones that are most capable of doing that, they can extend their agency into the world. Right now, Facebook is an extension of Mark Zuckerberg's agency into the world, or the agency of the people who are giving him money to operate the company, all those kind of things. So it's basically a massive system that extends the agency into the world. And of course, through doing that, actually, it's also a platform for other people to extend their agency into the world. Like, don't get me wrong, I actually really love Facebook in the way that it allows me to do things that I probably wouldn't be able to do otherwise, until other platforms are at the point where they are as functional. And so for me, it's actually a huge career booster, a huge way that I can engage sort of on the go with people from all over the world, vet information, etc. So the issue is not that AI suddenly gets awareness and becomes sort of self-aware and like starts to kill us. I think the issue is more, whose agency are we amplifying? Whose agency are we extending? And are we actually also extending the agency of other people, or leaving that out completely? And so the issue, I think, is more about are you living below the API? Are you living below sort of the logic rule set that makes you do certain things? Like, are you an Uber driver that is taking orders from a phone, or are you the guy who's like above the API, the one who's like who's making other people take orders from you through the system, basically? And so AI also has this sort of weird messianic dimension to it, at least in the conversation that I see out there, like the singularity rhetoric, because I think they have a fundamental misunderstanding of where technology and computing is moving towards. They're still operating from this weird client-server infrastructure design that has been around now for most of the internet existence, which is not going to be there in this way as much, at least for the most capable people. Like, I'm part of this other project called, this crypto project called Holochain, and basically it obviates completely the client-server model and puts all the data for applications into your own hands and onto your own devices, and basically makes data that you're currently by default sharing with all the people that are operating the servers of the applications that you're a part of. It makes those inaccessible to them, other than if they give you a better deal. Like, they say, hey, I want your data, I'll pay you for it, or I'll give you a discount, or you'll get some benefit of some other sort with it. Right now, you don't have that option, because the only way that we can construct our technological infrastructure is by having a server where all the data lives on, and then having some company operate that, and then you joining onto that server and then going out again. But all the changes of the data happens in their domain, in their fortress, in their like space. And so once you actually own your own data and it's on your own device, and you yourself operate it, and you yourself are capable of granting permission to use that data to other actors, be that a corporation or an individual or whatever, then the AI thing suddenly stops being such a big problem, because AI only works if it has mountains of data to chew through. And so they need to figure out how to get that data, and they need to give you a good deal for that data. Right now, you're not getting a good deal because you're the product, and you're sort of getting a free-ish service that you don't really realize the costs of.
Makes sense.
I feel like a sermon on the mount here.
No, I mean, it's I guess you're saying something similar to kind of maximizing the potential of the unique element of being human through an AI network, as opposed to the other way around, which is what most people think it will be.
Right. I think actually one good sort of fictional treatment of this topic is Dan Brown's Origin fiction novel, which talks a lot about these issues, like both on like the AI component as well as the sort of origin of life component. And I found a lot of the ideas that I mentioned in this call mirrored in his narrative really fascinating, especially the part about, which I haven't mentioned really, but dissipation-driven adaptation, which is basically a theory of how life came about, like abiogenesis, how life emerged from inorganic matter. And once you start to understand that life is sort of a way to more efficiently distribute energy throughout the universe, basically to increase entropy around you. And because we have this massive entropy or energy generator in our sky, the sun, that beams extreme amounts of energy onto our planet that needs to be dissipated, and we are basically the way that it is dissipated, then you start to realize that life is sort of that. I don't mean to like reduce it, I don't mean to like trivialize it either, but that's sort of one physical component of it. And then you can start to think about, oh, all this complexity that has emerged, like cells or like in species like viruses, mammals, dinosaurs, whatever, like these are massive scale emergences of life, and like larger and larger stable configurations of atoms and energy and whatever. And we are right now constructing a massive sort of superorganism of the entire planet that has as its veins and as its like delivery mechanisms of information, not like blood and rivers, whatever, but the internet. And like the internet basically building this global brain between all of the humans on this planet, and basically making like a super intelligence. But it's a creation of a much larger scale cooperative self-contained organism in a sense. And then maybe at some point, if we get good at that, we can actually send out spores into the universe and have people live on other planets, maybe.
That's super interesting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to hand it to Emil, but at just one point you said about increasing intelligence and whose agency are you extending? I think with a lot of the way the technologies are developed and centralized, like Facebook and the military developing a lot of AI, that's obviously the agency that their agency is being extended, and obviously that might not be for the best interest of everyone else. If you look at just inequality and all these things, sort of trends that are happening, but what you're saying about making sure you're above that sort of that threshold, if you like. Versus being below it, not to say Uber drivers are below it, but I understood your analogy. But yeah, absolutely, like being more in control of your data and your opportunities. And so, where do you think this is going in terms of like this second, third brain you're building? How AI is, like in that movie Her, how that might kind of replace this technology in the future, and what interesting things are you looking at in that area?
Well, first I'll talk about the agency part, and then I'll talk about the future. But my goal basically, or one of my goals, the areas of my life, the drivers of my life, is to get people that are in my area of influence from the 0 to 1 in agency. Like if you know the 0 to 1 analogy, which is something that Peter Thiel created, like it's a whole book, basically 0 to 1 based on like how companies achieve monopoly status or sort of a stable niche in the economy, then I think this is the goal for individuals, but with respect to agency. Like you need to reach your 0 to 1 in terms of agency, of being able to operate yourself and all the things that make you work well enough that you can solve most of your problems yourself. Right, that's it. And if you have that 0 to 1, then it's up to you to develop that into 1.1, 1.2, down to n infinity, whatever. And I won't be like spending too much thought on getting you to that, because it's up to you. But I am concerned with the people in my life to have the 0 to 1 of agency, because that means I can rely on them to not generate more problems than they're solving. And so, yeah, that's a big piece. And then the other thing, like where I see this going towards, and what sort of my current areas of exploration are, I just about a couple of weeks ago, I bought an Apple Watch. Not because I like a fanboy or whatever, like I actually had one of these before. I didn't find them very useful. And so I just sold them after a month again, once. But now that I'm now at this point where I want to put, like the reason I bought the Apple Watch pretty much basically is just because I wanted to be able to run around barefoot outside without having a phone or anything else on me, and be able to listen to music. And this thing allows me to stream music like with a cellular like eSIM, and just carry it on my wrist. And it was a freedom purchase. Like, oh, this will give me so much freedom because I won't have to carry all this electronic shit with me, and I will still be able to listen to music and make it easier for myself to do movement practice wherever I go, and without much difficulty, without much barrier, which is something that I need to do. Like, it's actually one of my 12 problems here. How might I pursue a movement practice independent of location and time of day that contributes to my wellness and brings me joy? And so I can't, the thing is, because I'm traveling so much, I have such a big challenge in being able to consistently work out, or like just be moving enough, that I need to find a way that I can make it do where I can do it wherever and whenever I want. And the sort of point from being normal and then to doing movement is like this, because I can't rely on having a stable habit. Yes, parkour is actually something that I'm getting into so much right now. Like, I've been watching so many videos, and I actually want to purchase some equipment, like some apparel as well, that allows me to do that anywhere. Also, I'm now at the point where I actually have pared down my wardrobe and all the equipment that I need on the road, that I basically can live out of my backpack for months on months. And I'm constantly looking out for ways to reduce that even more, and to invest in quality, so that I don't need to have as much functionality in as many different things, but in a small set of things as possible. So the watch thing, though, I bought, yes, for that reason that I just described, but I'm finding it more and more useful for like quick on-the-go extension of my agency, in a sense, through Siri. Basically where, like, hey Siri, record my conversation, and then it'll open an Evernote recording and it'll start recording. And like I was doing this for the first time 2 days ago. I was talking with a collaborator of mine on an arts project that we're doing for the Meta Modern Arts Festival in Kiev in September. And it was recording, and I had like 20 minutes of conversation recorded. And then I shared that with another collaborator of mine, and he could get the context of my conversation immediately and could give me more information. So this is like, I've gotten really, really, really good at recording information where it is appropriate in a format that makes sense. And then I'm able to share with other people that allows them to then work with me as well on that. And so this is what I love about this particular thing, because it is so mobile, so lightweight, and so easy for me to interact with it that I don't need to write something, I don't need to work with an interface, all of those things. And so yes, that's sort of one technological direction this is moving that I think is worthwhile exploring and thinking about. And it's basically just, it's sort of like the dream that they've had forever with the Her movie. Like it's basically you having this conversational interface with your digital life, basically, which is much more natural for us, where you're not forced to go down some UX path or whatever, but just talk with somebody and they do it. And that's basically the personal assistant thing that executives love in their like personal assistants, and which I think now is being democratized for us plebs as well.
Good for those of us below the threshold, the pleb threshold. I love that movie, that concept, like you're saying, it can be conversational, because that also gets you away from the screen, away from the matrix. As long as your attention and awareness is still yours and you're not being sucked in another vortex, right? Which could happen easily, like you saw, he falls in love with his own AI. But I think that style of relating to technology is much more natural and doesn't fix us in one place, like stationary, sitting down all day long, staring into this device. So for me, that seems like a great evolution. And when that stuff comes along, I'll definitely, I'm quite tempted to what you said about the Apple Watch, just to test how that kind of increases your ability to move around, because I hate being sitting down all day long in front of the computer. So that's super, super cool idea.
Yeah. And it also like it makes information that is coming in glanceable, but I don't need to interact with it immediately. Like if somebody sends me a notification on my phone and it's connected to my phone, then like I know somebody sends me a message, then I just glance quickly at it and it doesn't interrupt my conversation. I know whether I need to check it or not. All those kind of things. So I'm present with you right now. I'm receiving notifications, but I'm not even looking at it because it's not that relevant.
Yeah. Anyways, go on, Emil.
Yeah, it's always interesting to look into how your brain works and how you're able to quantify all these things and put them into to perspective and be more productive in that way. And I like what your mom said, like how you have everything figured out and how you're gonna intellectually attract the woman you like. And it made me think in the beginning, like, you have all these things quantified and intelligized and all these things that when are you really living? But then I heard you say later that you're actually taking the brain power, putting it into all these documents so you can be more in the intuitive feeling.
Yes.
Because I think that's very important, because if you look at the heart energetically, it has like 100 times stronger energetic field and 5,000 times more stronger magnetic field. So what I've been experiencing lately is when I get out of the mind, and I do that not by being more productive and writing things down, I literally just quit everything I do and do as little as possible. And that brings me out of my mind and brings me back into the body, into the heart. And from that space, it feels like, I guess it's intuition, or some people call it heart-based living. It's like you're really attracting just the right stuff that you need. I think we talked about this with flow and how the right people come into your life at the right times. But I feel like the more I get out of the mind and into the heart, the more I start attracting beautiful experiences, beautiful things, new projects, whatever it is, whatever the higher self or the thing that's running behind the scenes is attracting, happens for me mostly through the heart. So it was very important for me to hear that you actually use it as a way to get out of the mind, because in the beginning it seemed like a lot like, wow, you have it's almost like, when are you living? Because everything is already planned.
The point of this is to spend as little time as possible in these places, because like that's actually something that Tiago Forte, the creator of sort of this way of thinking about it, or parts of this way of thinking, because actually I've developed into different directions of my own, like that he talks about, like, this is not like to become more productive so that you can spend more time in your productivity tools. This is not what it's about. Like, dude, you get it wrong. Like, everybody gets it wrong. Like they reify again, they make into a thing this fetish of productivity. And this is also why I hate this word and this term and this whole culture around productivity, because it's basically just another way to commoditize your own time slices so that they're more profitably used for somebody else's gain. And so for me, I really like the term operativity more, or operation, or like that whole sort of root word, which comes from opus, which is a Latin word for work, but sort of not the work of like doing like trivial work, but like actually externalizing like craft. It's like crafting and like being an active, artistic, creative agent in the world, doing things in the world and creating things. And so this is why I called this other note that I showed you operativity playground, not productivity playground, because for me, it's more about becoming skilled at my craft, which is a lot to do with information. And you might actually not deal with as much information in your day-to-day life as I do. Like for me, it's just the direction that my life is going is into these very high abstract, very high philosophical places, at the same time as going even more into the body and like completely away from that. So it's sort of this, again, it's this sort of barbell approach. I'm doing both things and I'm avoiding the mediocre middle, which is where like you're doing nothing of value and it's sort of just like consuming, right? And so I'm going even more into the body and even more into sort of the most ethereal realms of the mind, if you will, but I'm not spending time exclusively in either of them. And so for me, like, I think you're probably much further along than me in terms of having more experience with that, as you say, heart-based living, in terms of more even more spontaneous living. I've gotten pretty good at that, but to be honest, like only the last 2 months have been the real flow state experience that I've been experiencing just straight now. And it's like, I feel like it's sort of the 0 to 1, not only in agency, and I sometimes say like now that I feel like an adult for the first time in my life, like an actual true adult, you know, that can do his own things and isn't reliant on other people, which is quite a sad and tragic thing to say, actually, if you think about it. Like that, I mean, I have had adult-like traits for a long time now, but I've always felt like I wasn't in control of my life completely. And now I feel that. And so it's not only the 0 to 1 in terms of control of your life, but also I feel like this is something that probably Michael will understand even better than I, like having created inside you all the mechanisms or the means for generating your own dopamine, your own like internal chemistry that is feeding you the stuff that allows you to be sort of on this constant high. Like not that you're like always going to be there, but that you're like you're generating yourself the chemical rewards that you need to feel good about what you're doing, rather than getting them out of other things outside there. And so you're high on your own supply, if you will.
Well, they always say don't get high on your own supply, but there's different context for that.
I think you should get high on this own supply, but not on other things.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the way you framed it, Moritz, in terms of like operativity and like what makes you a better craftsman. And that could be storytelling, you know, like you said, not being sort of NPC in the game where all these narratives are just fed to you. But how do you, and that's what I was going to ask you as well, is like you were talking about getting your friends and people around you from 0 to 1. Like, what is that? How do you define that? Is it just in terms of how they feel in control of themselves, or you sort of see from them exuding like truth and sort of integrity, and like how do you sort of measure and sense that around people around you? And those are really the people I want to spend more time with. Like that's, to be honest, that's why I started this with you guys, because I felt like you all had that level where we could have a great conversation or build and support and share with each other. Right. So I'm trying to reduce the sort of noise around me from people that are still sort of struggling to get there. But yeah, how do you approach that?
It's a great question. I think it's not as much about for me to do something very active, like where I'm really putting a lot of energy and like getting people from there to there, whatever. But it's more about for me I think there are different levels sort of ways you can help somebody. So one is just to share your information, and somebody's just following and consuming your information, and it does something inside them, and it makes like click, oh, this is interesting, and like I'll follow you more or whatever. And then you need to have sort of, just like with every product or service company, you need to have offerings at different levels, if you will, in your life. Like, so if you're a producer of information and you're constantly like posting interesting things, then you become somebody in the network of nodes that somebody else is paying attention to, and you start to have an effect on their subconscious, definitely, even if not maybe immediately on their conscious mind. And then if they find something so interesting that they're like, oh, I want to know more about that, and they reach out to you, then you can give them pointers to other more involved pieces of information, perhaps, that they can do in their own time. And then at every step of the way, as you increase sort of the energy input, in a sense, into that conversation or that relationship, you feel for whether the person is acting out of integrity, out of sort of an honest interest in getting better. And I personally have developed a pretty good sense of that. It's very felt. I don't really have like measures that I put there that I like pay attention to, but it's just, I can sense it. And I think everybody has that to some degree. It's sort of the similar or analogous or even the same sense that I think Jordan Peterson talks about when he talks about that meaning sense that you have when you have a great conversation and it's just everything's flowing because you're constantly going into the direction where you're like at the edge of your ability and you're sort of exploring. You're not just regurgitating what you already know. And so what I'm doing right now with you as well is like, I have lots of these threads in my thinking, but by you giving me questions and by working through this, I'm actually thinking them into new relationships with each other as well. And so in terms of how I help people, like, so sometimes actually I've now had some weird, not weird, for me they're not weird, but for society they would be weird experiences of, like I use Tinder, right? And because I'm always in different places, I use Tinder and I meet people in different cities, and it's very interesting to observe where people are coming from, how they project their own sense of their identity into that app, all those kind of things. So for me, it's a very powerful cultural indicator of where the culture is at and what people are displaying of themselves to get access to sex or comfort or whatever. And so because it's a very like high incentive thing. And so people are have a good incentive to do certain things. And so I sometimes meet up with women from that app, and then the relationship or the meeting will go into various directions. But one of those directions is that after a conversation with me, or multiple conversations or multiple meetings, and that might involve more affection or intimacy or not, they will actually stop their sort of self-harming and promiscuous behavior because they realize it's actually acting out somebody else's agency or something that they themselves were not aware of, that they're struggling with, but they were unable to articulate. And suddenly they have this interest in actually making progress in their life. And again, like, I want to be very mindful here. I'm not trying to create a savior complex in myself or to like go out and save people. I'm not about that at all. And I'm not actually seeking out people to save at all. But I am interested in the experimentation of where, like, basically my mission in life is sort of to learn as much as I can about as many different subjects as I possibly can, and about as many different ways that people are showing up in the world and are interacting with the world as I can. Like, basically learn as much as possible that allows me to, whenever I interact with somebody, have a very good sense of where they are coming from, and I can appreciate where they're coming from and understand why they're coming from there, and then find a way to nudge any kind of conflict between them and me, or between them and other people, out of the meat space where blood can flow and into the informational space where if you resolve something up here in like information space, then it can travel out into the real world and you have less real conflict in the world. And so for me, the world has become now this massive open game and playing field and experimentational playground where I can, whenever I meet somebody, regardless of who they are, pretty much, unless they're dangerous to me, I will be curious about like where they're coming from and find a way to interface with them, build some kind of meaningful, authentic connection, and then based on that, help them, whatever their goals are, achieve them, or sort of move one step closer to that. So that's basically it.
Cool, good answer. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I feel the same way, like, because I see people struggling with their health a lot, and so I can always tell kind of based on my conversations where people are at, like what information is actually useful to them. And if you just give something that is a different level almost, they can't grasp it or integrate it, then it's not going to help them. So some people just need like really basic information, and that kind of steers them onto a better path. But yeah, I think that's kind of what we're all here to do, is really use our perception, in the ways that can help other people that maybe don't have that experience or are stuck in some kind of loop around life. And a lot of people get stuck in what to do with relationships and self-esteem issues. You probably see a lot of those, type of people in life, and then other people just in terms of their health, how they treat their body. It's all related to that, right? So it's like, finding out what's worked for you, and you can kind of validate and refine that when you see it work in other people. And it also gives you practice, like, for the next person you help or work with, what worked in terms of like making things easy to be compliant, to like developing new habits and things like that. So I think that's kind of what we're all doing in one sense or another, once we have that agency to be able to live like that, where we're not just taking orders from someone else and just, trying to make a living.
Great, I think, ending point. I like that.
Cool. Yeah, we're coming up with time, unless anyone else has got any other questions. All right, looks good. All right, thanks guys. That was a really good chat. We'll catch you on Thursday.
See you Thursday.
Ciao.
Aaron.
Awesome.